Hi everyone. In this video I'm going to focus on the writing section of the Cambridge C1 Advanced exam. But what I say also applies to the B2 First exam because the formats are very similar. The main difference is that at the B2 First level you only have to write between 140 and 190 words rather than 220 to 260 words. Okay, let's get to it. First thing is to understand the task, and this is what it is. You have an hour and a half to write 2 pieces of work. In part 1, you are given a topic on which you have to write an essay of between 220 and 260 words. In part 2, you are given a choice of tasks and you have to write one of the following: a letter or email, a proposal, a report or a review. And whichever one you choose, it also has to be between 220 and 260 words. The marks available for each part are the same, so you should plan to spend 45 minutes on each part. Now, what does an essay of 260 words look like? Well, it looks like this. Now, don't worry about reading it. We'll talk about content in a moment. What I want to focus on here is the length and the structure. You can see that there are 4 paragraphs which we can break down like this. Paragraph 1 is the introduction and consists of 2 sentences. Paragraph 2 presents the first side of the argument and consists of 4 sentences. Paragraph 3 presents the other side of the argument and consists of 3 sentences. And finally, paragraph 4 is the conclusion and consists of 3 sentences. So the whole essay is just 12 sentences of about 20 words each, which everyone should be able to produce quite easily in the time available. Now, I'm not saying that your essay should have exactly 12 sentences or how many sentences each paragraph should have. What I mean is that your essay should be very similar to this, both in length and structure. Now, what you definitely don't want to do is just to read the question quickly and then start writing as much as you can in the time available. There are other things to consider. Your answer will be marked from 0 to 5 in each of the following areas: content, communicative achievement, organisation, and language. This means that your answer needs to cover all the necessary points, have the correct effect on the reader and be written in an appropriately formal, informal or neutral style, be in clear, well-connected paragraphs, and use a variety of words and structures and not contain too many vocabulary or grammar errors. On the last point, language, you have to strike a balance between writing what you know to be accurate and using more adventurous vocabulary, structures and idioms that you might make mistakes with. Where language is concerned, there are a couple of things I would advise you to avoid. The first is very long sentences. The longer the sentence, the more likely it is going to contain structural errors or sound clumsy. So keep in mind that idea of 20 words or so as a maximum length. And the second thing to avoid is repetition. That applies to content, vocabulary and structures. Now you have a good idea of what you have to produce in terms of length and content. You can see that spending 5 or even 10 minutes thinking about ideas you might include and the overall structure of what you're going to write is going to be time well spent. Okay, so let's have a look at the kind of questions you can expect in the exam. Here's a typical part 1 question. It says, your class has listened to a radio discussion about the advantages and disadvantages of receiving different types of presents. You have made the notes below. And then you can see the bullet points on the left: luxuries, homemade items, experiences, and the opinions on the right. Each opinion relates to one of the types of present. So the best presents are things you couldn't afford to buy for yourself, relates to luxuries. If someone spent time making a present for me, it shows how much they care, relates to homemade presents. And "I don't need more things, I'd rather be taken to the theatre or a football match" relates to experiences. These so-called opinions are there to expand on the one-word bullet points to help you understand what the bullet points mean, as it might not be immediately obvious. Now look at the instructions below. It says, write an essay discussing two, emphasized in bold, two of the types of presents in your notes. You should explain which of these types of presents is the best to receive, giving reasons in support of your answer. And you can see also the bold type there to emphasize its importance. And then it says, you may, if you wish, make use of the opinions expressed in the discussion, but you should use your own words as far as possible. That means don't take two of the opinions given above and copy them word for word into your essay. Now here's where the planning is important. Think about your attitude to receiving gifts and gifts you have been given in the past. Have you ever been given luxuries, homemade items, or experiences? Think about positives and negatives in all cases. Receiving a luxury item might seem wonderful, but it might alter your relationship with the person who gave it to you. You might feel embarrassed to receive something so expensive, or that you now owe that person something. What if you are given a homemade item that you hate, but feel obliged to keep on display? This is the way your mind should be working. Once you have thought about these things for a while, you must decide which two you are going to write about. And once you have made your decision, it's just a case of putting your ideas into that 4-paragraph format that I showed you earlier. So your introduction could be something like this. When we think of receiving gifts, it usually brings to mind something positive, a happy occasion such as Christmas, a birthday, or an anniversary. But in today's society of mass consumerism, gift giving and receiving can be problematic. Here I am going to look at the pros and cons of receiving luxuries as presents and compare that to receiving homemade gifts. That's 3 sentences and 60 words. The next paragraph should then detail the pros and cons of receiving luxuries, and the third paragraph should do the same but for homemade items. In the final concluding paragraph, you must say which of the two you would prefer to receive and give a reason. And it's perfectly okay to say you would rather be given a sports car or expensive jewellery than something homemade. And you don't have to be truthful about your opinions anyway. Remember, the examiner will be assessing your use of English, not your character. Okay, now here are some typical Part 2 questions. As it says at the top, you have to answer one of the questions. For question 2, you have to write an email to a friend. For question 3, you have to write a proposal to your college principal about a magazine subscription. And for question 4, you have to write a review of a play. As with Part 1, spend some time planning. Read all 3 questions carefully and think about which you would be most comfortable writing about. And again, remember that this can be invention. So for question 4, you can invent a live theatre performance you have attended. You can invent everything: the name of the play, its strengths and weaknesses, and the pros and cons of the theatre where you saw it. The answers to these questions will not follow the same 2 sides of the argument format as the Part 1 question, but you still have to follow the instructions carefully, include everything mentioned in the question, and present your ideas in a way that is easy for the reader to follow. Okay, I hope this has helped you understand exactly what you have to do in the writing section of the exam, and provided some advice on how you should approach each of the tasks. I've also created 3 PDFs on the subject, which contain more sample questions, model answers, and useful expressions for essay writing. If you haven't seen those, drop me an email at this address to get them.